Congressman, thank you so much for being here. So I wanted to start first with oversight, because you obviously have you're the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. How hard is it to fulfill your oversight duties under the Trump administration? Does Tulsi Gabbard pick up your calls?
It's a little early to say. There's a lot of letters sitting in the inbox there. We'll see how fast we get responses to them. So honestly, I mean, it's an array of different people, and I don't anticipate that it'll be radically different, but it will be radically more important. I mean, for at least two reasons. Number one, well, three reasons. Oversight's always important in the intelligence community because journalists and lawyers and advocacy groups are not crawling all over the activities of the intelligence community the way they do over so many of our activities. Number two, without coming off as too partisan here, there is no reason to believe that the president will welcome the product that the IC must provide, which is the unvarnished, unbiased truth. So you already you have a problem that has probably already been exacerbated by the firing of General Hawk at the NSA. And then thirdly, without coming off as too partisan, this is an administration that has been more than willing to take actions which are either in violation of the law or on the margins of the law. And when you're talking about that happening inside the activities of the intelligence community, that's a very serious thing, because it's serious and because it's hidden. So it'll be hard, but it'll be more important than ever.
Mm-hmm. And obviously one issue that has caught your attention and many of your colleagues is the use of Signal by some top administration officials to discuss these war plans. I'm wondering if you think that Pete Hegseth should have to resign over his Signal use.
So I don't think Pete Hegseth is up to the job. I think he's deeply out of his depth. And that sounds like an attack on Pete Hegseth. It's probably the hardest job in Washington. I mean, it's the most complicated, largest, most sprawling bureaucracy, subject to all sorts of authorities and controls. A genius would struggle to do that job well, and Pete Hegseth is not that genius. And so, I'm not surprised by where we ended up. I know why he put up weapons systems and weather is good, 0800, MQ9. It's the kind of thing that, especially if you're a guy, the testosterone flows, it's self-validating. But what worries me in a way, you didn't ask this question, but what worries me more about that maybe predictable thing is Mike Waltz putting it up on the first Signal chat. I know Mike very well. I respect Mike. I trust Mike. Mike was a Green Beret. I mean, very few people in the government are trained with the discipline and the prudence and the care and the abiding by all protocols and procedures than Mike Waltz. But what happens is when Mike Waltz gets into an environment where accountability is an abstraction, maybe optional, where the rules aren't clear, Mike Waltz starts a Signal chat and inadvertently includes a reporter. So I worry more about the context that can even warp a good, well-trained, disciplined person like Mike Waltz. That's a little frightening.
Do you think that he should have to resign his position?
If the administration were sort of telling the Congress how these things happen, I'd be in a better position to say, that was a willful act of negligence or something. So it's a little harder to answer in that case. Again, I respect and trust Mike, and this might have been a one-off, but it's a one-off that never would have happened if Mike were in a context of serious discipline, protocol, and accountability.
I want to ask you about AI. That's obviously something that you're very focused on. There was a headline recently that caught attention for me from Reuters. Huawei readies new AI chip for mass shipment as China seeks NVIDIA alternatives. Wondering if you think the US is falling behind China in the AI race.
We're not. We're not falling behind China in the AI race, but we're also not that far ahead. DeepSeek sort of overturned the table, and everybody was like, this near capable competitor to our best generative models was built a lot more cheaply with a lot less compute, a lot less power consumption. Who knows exactly what went down there? They may have, used pre-trained stuff that made, that was actually attributable to our IP originally. But no, that's one area where I'm confident that we're second to none, but and this is going to be true of all technologies with respect to China, but our lead is not wide. And if we don't act very intentionally about maintaining that lead with all that requires, we will soon be behind.
And the Trump administration sort of continued the Biden administration's practice of using these export controls to prevent chips and other technologies from flowing to China. There was a big Biden rule before he left office that set up a regime essentially for controlling the export of AI chips. I'm wondering if you think that that's the wrong approach and if Trump should reverse that rule.
I don't think it's the wrong approach. I do think that you can, in the short term, control the flow of technology to China. What you can't do is, in the long run, control the dispersion of technology generally. I mean, there's no examples you can point to. When Pakistan decides they're going to develop an atom bomb, they do. And so, it gives us a little bit of a lead. The fact that they the fact that they don't have ASML's most advanced lithography machines gives us a little bit of lead, but it's a little bit of a lead. It's not a big lead. And it doesn't work forever, right? Again, technology disperses.
And speaking of technology, you were actually one of the Democrats that opposed the bill force a sale or ban TikTok in the US last year. It passed, obviously. I'm wondering if you support Trump's decision to kick the can down the road on that.
It's a very weird position for me to be in because this had nothing to do with technology. I was just never going to vote for anything that was the federal government telling the citizens of the world's greatest democracy, you don't get to have access to this media. You know, the Supreme Court decided that it was consistent with the First Amendment. With all due deference from this non-lawyer to the justices, I think that's bananas. Again, if we can't trust our citizens, and maybe we can't, in which case we'll learn that in the next 5 to 10 years, with acting as democratic actors, able of being critical about the information that they get, we should hang up our spurs right now. So I was never going to vote to ban information or a media outlet, even though I'm probably one of the more cognizant people with respect to the nature of the Chinese threat there. But then, and here's why I'm in a weird position, daggone it, I'm not happy it became a law, but it became a law, right? So, and by the way, there's no provision for the president to just decide he wants to keep it on there. So, it's another example of something that worries me profoundly, which is, folks, laws are laws. There's no exemption in that law because the president really doesn't want to shut down TikTok, and that is, of course, where we are.
I wanted to ask you about Elon Musk, because obviously he's done a fair amount of business in China, and there was these reports about Trump blocking him from this defense briefing on China. Do you think that his business there and the fact that he has such access to government right now makes him a national security risk?
I think it's something you'd want to consider really carefully. I'm not going to tell you that that he should be forbidden from doing business in China. It's just we have these structures. We have a well-elaborated system to address conflicts of interest. And I have zero confidence, of course, that any of those structures or any of those protocols are in place with respect to Elon Musk. What really breaks my heart, I mean, I don't know the man, but I'm a congenital optimist. I thought at first, here's a guy who, whatever else you think of the weirdness, is a spectacular disruptor of things in need of disruption. Electric cars, launch, you name it. Starlink. And he could have come in his area of expertise, technology, and radically transformed the federal government. I mean, as people in this room will know, we have departments that are running stuff that was old when I was in high school in the 1980s, right? Running COBOL, stuff that kids today don't even know about. And he could have said, you know what we're going to do? Break things. In 1 year, we're going to migrate the federal government's operations out of these god-awful data. Wow.
That was a lot.
Mr. Musk, I apologize. My car's not going to work anymore, is it? He could have said, we're going to get out of these stovepipes, we're going to actually move the federal government, something we should have done long ago, onto the cloud, which A, is more secure, saves us tens of billions of dollars a year, and C, opens the door to actually bringing some AI applications onto federal data. Unfortunately, he gave into his worst, I just bought Twitter and I'm going to fire everybody to see what happens instincts with respect to the government. But what a lost opportunity.
And I wanted to ask you about Ukraine, because obviously, the administration's been pushing forward on trying to negotiate peace and get Russia to stop the war there. I'm wondering, with all this news about Trump trying to push Ukraine to accept some kind of deal that recognizes Crimea as Russian, what's Ukraine's recourse if it resists that? Doesn't it eventually have to go along with what the U.S. wants?
No, it doesn't. Its predicament is far grimmer. I've been trying to suss out what the administration, what the vice president and the president mean we're walking away. Inside the Congress, there's a substantial majority that would continue to support the Ukrainians. That may not be enough, but that exists. Mm-hmm. And no, you can look at the British in World War II. The examples of David and Goliath and David ultimately prevailing, especially when David is defending his homeland and his country and his people from an invader, are there. If what the president means is, because I didn't abide by my campaign promise to end this war in the first 24 hours, we're going to cut off all aid, that means that it's entirely Europe, and Europe can keep this fight up for some time. They can't probably reverse the military gains that the Russians have made, but they can extract a huge cost from Russia. Again, my view would be, let's, whatever else, put the Ukrainians in a better negotiating position. And for God's sake, don't offer up a peace plan that is capitulation. Because a plan that says you keep Crimea, you keep the current lines, you don't get security guarantees, and thank you very much for the minerals, that's not a peace plan, that's extortion.
Mm. I wanted to ask you about crypto too. You're one of many Democrats that's expressed reservations of the Trump family's crypto ventures, but you also recently decided to vote to advance the Republican stablecoin legislation. What do you think of the prospects of that? Is there anything that would cause Democrats like yourself to pull back fully on supporting that bill? Well,
it was a fairly small number of Democrats that supported it to start with. So no. Look, I think stablecoins is the easy part. Mm-hmm. Market structure is just hard. I was in the financial markets for a long time. I will tell you, it's really hard to get your head around the market structure bill that we're going to take on next. But no. Crypto broke my heart, right? I'm an innovation guy. I love innovation. I used to work with venture capitalists, et cetera. I love innovation. And so for 10 years ago, I thought, oh my God, crypto, I believe it. We're going to have non-hierarchical syndicalist structures. C Corps are going away, and we're going to disintermediate the payment systems and everything. And in 10 years, what actual applications have we seen out of crypto? Zippo. Now, by the way, all my friends in the industry are like, well, we're just 2 weeks away from disrupting the remittances. Remittances, for God's sake, it costs 8% to send money to Guatemala, right? This thing is just sitting there waiting to be disrupted. But so we're investing all this time and energy. The crypto industry has become this outsized political player. A lot of my colleagues, sort of should quake in their boots over the crypto money. But what have you actually done? And by the way, I don't say that to criticize. I say, by God, your challenge with the Congress would be made so much easier if you would actually have an example of an application or a product that made any of our constituents' lives better. So anyway, I'm promised that that's coming soon, but we'll see.
I'm going to give you one more opportunity to keep on your financial services hat. Representative Lucas told us this morning that he'd be willing to work across the aisle with Democrats on a bill to keep the Fed's independence, preserve that. Wondering what you think. What would you like that to look like?
Big of him. Who was it? Representative who?
Frank Lucas.
Okay, good. I'm glad to know that Frank Lucas is opposing the destruction of the American capitalist economy. So is the question, are we?
What do you? What would you like that to? Would you be willing to work on a bipartisan bill like that, and what would you like to look like?
Yeah, look, I think I know what's happening here, right? As a Democrat, I'm supposed to say, okay, the president is lawless, the Constitution is in flames, all we're going to do is resist. I know that's what I'm supposed to say, and I feel it. But look, I'm elected to advance the interests of my constituents. And damn right I'm going to fight hard on constitutional issues and raise hell when the law is broken, or suggest that maybe, my Republican friends should be a little concerned about what the next Democratic president now gets to do with law firms, universities, and private corporations. But no, look, again, this is not a popular view in the most angry corners of the Democratic activists, but my job is to try to advance the interests of my constituents in the country. So Yes, I'll work on a bipartisan crypto bill, and damn right I'll work on, again, it sort of makes me laugh. Are we really going to litigate whether we should have an independent Federal Reserve? Because if so, we got a long way to go in terms of real bipartisanship.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Collins.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everybody.